So I've had this idea for a while now to do a video series where I cook different meats using only the 5 senses to gauge when something's done or ready to move to the next step of the process. I think we live in a world where everything now is automated, artificial, electronic. We've got so much data, everything is tracked, that I think we tend to lose touch with what's actually happening to the food that we're cooking. And we look more at the results and the data coming from our probe thermometers, from the apps that track the temperature in the firebox, things like that. So today I'm cooking some pork spare ribs, and I'm going to rely solely on sight, smell, taste, touch, and sound. No timers, no thermometers, no probes, no temperature gauges, just the 5 senses: fire, seasoning, and meat. So I've taped over all my temperature gauges. That way I'm going to rely solely on my experience with using this cooker, my experience with running the fire, to make decisions on adding wood, heating it up, cooling it down, things like that. But no thermometers, no temperature gauges, no timers. We're not tracking anything with any kind of device. It's going to be just running this firebox and then really paying attention to what these ribs do as they're cooking. So another piece of this is not only just paying attention to the meat as it progresses along the cook, but also paying attention to the fire, which when you're doing this style of cooking, the fire is the most important part. If you don't run a clean fire, you run it too hot, too cold, wrong type of wood, things like that, that's going to make the biggest impact on the end result. So I'm going to get these open up and we'll get them ready to cook. So here's your rib bones. Usually 13 bones to a rack. Your spare ribs have these little pieces of cartilage that come off, and then it has this piece of meat here. So this section of it, when you trim that off, apparently somebody in St. Louis discovered that you can cut this piece off, and now we call this St. Louis style spare ribs. There's 4 altogether. Okay. So this is a custom blend pork rub that I mixed. Just mixed it to taste. I didn't use any measurements. One of my goals for this challenge is to use the 5 senses as much as possible, so taste being one of them, rather than follow a recipe or measure this out. I just added ingredients till I liked it. And it is a sweet and salty mix. So it's got obviously some salt, it's some pink Himalayan salt, some white sugar, some brown sugar, it's got some paprika, a little bit of chili powder to give it some bite. It's not really a spicy rub, it does have a little spice to it. I'm going fairly generous with this on these. Notice I'm not using any kind of binder. You can use mustard or oil or whatever to help the seasoning stick. I find that ends up being messy and doesn't help a whole lot. Maybe if you're doing some competition ribs or something where you want everything to be 100%, maybe you would do that, but in my opinion it adds an extra step that's not worth the maybe a little bit extra that you get from it. So, plus if you mix your rub right, it'll stick pretty well anyway. Where this is a mostly sugar and salt based rub, you'll see it's already dissolving and sticking to the meat just fine. So a visual cue of knowing when these are ready to go on, you can see that the seasoning is mostly dissolved and it's pretty much liquid on these right now. So that's exactly what I want to see. So these are actually ready to go on the smoker. We're using this top rack. It does get warmer up top here, which means we can burn less fuel, burn less wood, and still get the same temperature. Leaving a little bit of an air gap between these. just to make sure the ends of the bones get some smoke on them. And then end the video before you stop moving. Okay, so another visual cue when running the fire is how your fire is stacked. So this is a perfect fire right now. You've got hot coal bed down below. You've got a layer of logs that is mostly burnt, but still somewhat intact. Haven't crumbled yet. You can see this one down here. And then another layer of solid logs on top of that. So once this log here sort of crumbles and becomes part of the coal bed, that's when it's time to add 2 more logs across this way. So, sense of touch. This is a little bit too hot to touch right now, which leads me to believe that the fire's run a little bit hotter than I would typically run it for the duration of the cook. Since we just started the fire, I typically have more fuel on it to start. So it usually burns up. It'll spike around 325, 350 degrees at the most. And then I just let it die down and kind of settle into that 250, 275 range. When it is in that 250, 275 range, usually you can rest your hand on this and it'll feel pretty warm, like uncomfortably warm, but not warm enough to burn you. This is just a little bit beyond that. With this type of cooker, you let it burn down. There's plenty of air in here, plenty of airflow. I'm not worried this early on in the cook about that causing any issues with these ribs. It's really just part of my process. Like I said, starting the fire a little bit bigger, letting it settle down. That way, by the time it gets down to that 275, you got a good, consistent coal bed that you're working with, which that's really what helps maintain a consistent temperature. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably 325 to 350 right now. So another visual cue as far as fire management goes is the color of the smoke. Now when you're running a nice hot fire, you want the smoke to be pretty clear, maybe a tiny bit of a blue hue to it, but you definitely don't want to see white or gray and absolutely no black smoke. Right now we've got a very transparent smoke. You can tell it's there, but it doesn't look too thick. So that's an indication that our fire is operating really well. When you're running at the right temperature, this should be about a B flat. Fire's running still a little bit hot. I mean, I can feel it from here. The cook chamber still is very warm to the touch. So we're still a little hot, so I'm still gonna let this die down to where there's very little flame left and all of this becomes part of the coal bed before I start doing the Lincoln log stacks again on top of that. Audio clue is if there's any sizzle happening. We're smoking these ribs, we don't wanna hear a lot of sizzle. A little bit of bubbling's okay, but if we hear like tss, then we know we're cooking them too hot. So if we get in close and listen, I don't hear anything. If you look back at the fire, I don't know if you can hear that whoosh of air, kind of like a jet engine far away. That to me, that's the sound of good airflow. So that's a good sound. I don't hear any sizzle, so we're in good shape. It's burned down to mostly coal bed. Those logs are all disintegrated. It's still very hot. A lot of heat coming off of those coals. So I'm going to just go ahead and add 2 small logs to it for now. They should combust right away because of the heat. Probably the toughest part about this is not being able to check the temperature gauges. Like I'm really used to seeing those every 5 minutes or so, checking on them. That's really a good pulse on where the fire's at. So that's probably the hardest thing. And then also I haven't looked at a clock since we started. So we're seeing some thicker white smoke start to come out. So I'm gonna go check the firebox and see what's going on over there. So it looks like those last 2 logs that I put on, they ignited pretty quick, but they are doing more of a slow burn. So right now the coal bed to flame ratio has moved more to the coal bed side than the flame side. So when you have less flame happening, less combustion, you're gonna get a little bit more smoldering, which is gonna result in some of that thicker smoke. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw 2 more logs on. I think the coal bed's down enough to where I'm not feeling the intensity of heat like I was before. I'm gonna add 2 more logs, hopefully get a bigger flame going, which is gonna create a little more airflow and help the fire burn a little bit cleaner. That's looking much better. We got a good flame going. And the smoke is transparent again. So I feel like it's cooled down a little bit, not a ton. I still think we're at about 300, maybe slightly over 300. My guess is 300. So we're getting our first real smell coming through here. When pork fat starts to render, it's got a very distinct smell. It's like, imagine cooking bacon and you smell bacon. That's what you're smelling, is that fat rendering down. If you get in close, you can see a couple things. So let's do visual inspection here. Remember how moist these were at the beginning when that seasoning first dissolved? You can see that that's now dried off. And then as the fat starts to render, the meat starts to sweat, you'll start to see these little pockets of moisture that start to appear, and you'll see the meat start to shrink. And we're starting to see a little bit of shrinkage on the bones here. I don't know if you can see that on these. You can start to see the end of the bones exposed just a little bit. That's our first, that and the smell is the first indication that the fat is starting to render, which is where you'll see the meat shrink down off the bone. We'll start to see it sweat more, and we'll see those little puddles of moisture start to build up. So something else that we're dealing with right now, if you remember when we started this cook a couple hours ago, the entire smoker was in the shade, and it was probably around 70 degrees outside. Now everything's in the direct sunlight, and it's probably in the mid 80s right now, temperature-wise. So that's probably adding, if I had to guess, 15 to 20 degrees of just heat from the sunlight to this, which means that we can burn a smaller fire to maintain the same temperature, which actually, believe it or not, does affect the overall flavor. In the wintertime, you tend to get smokier flavored food, because imagine if it's 20 degrees out compared to 80 degrees out. That's 60 additional degrees that you have to maintain just with the fire, which means you're burning more wood, means you're creating more smoke, which means more flavor on your meat. So just an interesting fact. Sunlight does add heat, but it doesn't add flavor. Yep. So we're going to do 3 physical tests now. You can see the fat starting to pool up on the surface. You can see some spots where it's oozing out. So 3 things we're going to do. First, the skewer test. And I'm going to do this with the thermometer, but we're not using a thermometer. Just measuring how much friction is in the meat. That one still has a little bit of tug to it. That one's okay. This one, let's see, this one's thinner. That goes right through pretty easy. So that's probably the closest one to being done. If these pass 2 or more of the 3 tests, then they're getting pretty close to being done. The second one's the bend test. That one you can see is still a little bit firm. It's got some flop to it, but still has a little bit of stiffness. This one was thinner. You can see that one is a lot thinner. The last one is the break test, so we want to actually try to pull these bones apart and see how easy it is to rip. Right now it's still pretty strong, so they still have a little ways to go. Those are the 3 tests, the 3 kind of signs that the ribs will give you that they're getting close to being done. The end result that we're going for, the perfect rib, the meat should come clean off the bone, but it shouldn't fall off the bone, and you should have to actually pull it off with your teeth. But when you do, it should come clean. The other test is when you take a bite of the meat, it should leave teeth marks in it. If it's undercooked, then it's going to pull bigger shreds of meat off and be a little more stringy. If it's overcooked, when you bite into it, it's probably just going to pull everything off. Really tempting right now to grab a meat thermometer and just go check and see where these things are at. Go. So I'm guessing we're at 275 degrees. So I think we're probably about 5 hours in. They're kind of still got a ways to go. I was going to try to not wrap these, but I think just to finish them, I'm going to wrap them in foil. I think that'll probably get them finished within the hour, maybe even half hour. This one in front here looks pretty dang close. You get the meat coming off the bones. It's pretty juicy. We could probably argue that that one's just about done, but these 3 in the back are a little bit thicker, and they're still acting like they got a ways to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these out, wrap them in foil, and then that should speed up the final process of getting finished. Another visual thing here is you'll see the marrow sort of starts melting and bleeding out like that. It's also a pretty good sign that it's getting close to being done. Do a tear test on this. It's starting to give a little bit, but not quite there. So I was doing a probe test on the smallest one, the skinny one here, and it's actually pretty frictionless going through. So I wanted to open that one up. Take a look at it. That looks pretty dang good to me. Bend test, it's floppy. The brake test, it's hot, so it's hard to pull apart, but it feels like it's going to, yeah, it's starting to tear a little bit. You can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and say that one is done enough to pull off. You could probably go a little bit longer and it would get a little softer. I don't want to risk overcooking it. So this is the smallest one, and it's done. As far as I can tell, it's done. Normally I'd let this rest for a while, but I've been waiting a long time to see this, so letting it rest would just help the flavors balance out a little bit, help them cool down. And it's cutting like butter. Nice clean cuts. Ooh, that looks good. Good smoke ring. You can see how a lot of that fat's rendered out. That's going to be a good rib. Yeah, it's cutting smooth. If it's underdone, then you'll notice you have to saw through it. If it's overdone, the blade will just kind of smush through the meat. We're actually getting a nice crisp cut. This is beautiful. This is what we want to see. So, time for the taste test. First of all, you can see how glistening that is. It's juicy. It's not dry. So we're looking for teeth marks on clean bone. Yeah, pretty good. Flavor's perfect. Yep, you can see teeth are cutting right through it. Meat sticking to the bone. It could come off a little bit cleaner. Probably could have let this go another 20 to 30 minutes. But I'm not going to complain about that at all. That's awesome. That's good. So you can see a little bit of meat stuck on the bone. You could get that off with your teeth if you tried, but so probably could have gone just a tiny bit longer. We'll let the other ones that are bigger, we'll let them go a little bit longer and see if we can get those to be the clean bone. So in the meantime, it's a good snack, kind of a reward for the effort so far, and looking forward to get the rest of them off here shortly. I've thrown some more logs in the fire, got it going pretty hot. With the foil on, you can push the temperatures a little bit to speed things up without risking drying the meat out. So pretty confident that I could pull any of the three off right now and they would be okay. I think probably giving them another 20-30 minutes or so, and they'll start to be just before that fall off the bone tenderness, which is what we're going for. I just did a probe check on these. I think they're just about done. If not done, you can see the meat's come off the bone quite a bit on those couple of bones there. There's not much friction at all. Flop test, nice and bendy. The tear test, oh yeah, it's tearing off. So that one for sure is done. These other two are pretty much done as well. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off. We'll let them rest for a couple minutes and we'll slice into them. Okay, stop it there. All right, so everything is off the smoker, so the challenge is over. I'm gonna do one last guess in the temperature and then I'm gonna reveal here. I think we're right at between 250 and 275. Oh, right at 200. So it's lower than I thought. Which leads me to believe that I'm probably high on all of my guesses because I would have thought that what I'm feeling here was hotter than that. So we'll have to go back and watch the footage. I thought it'd be fun to do an actual temperature check on these. These just came off the smoker. So they're still as hot as basically as hot as they've gotten. Based off what I'm seeing here, it's definitely very hot to the touch. Normally if these get all the way to 200 degrees, the meat would be quite a bit more shrunk and it'd be falling off the bone. My guess is that we're gonna be at between 185 and 190 is my guess. So I'm gonna say actually between 180 and 185, let's say that. So I'm gonna go right here in the middle here, 171. Let's see if it gets up to 180. Here's 172, 73, So it's off by 6 or 7 degrees, at least on that part. Let's check another couple spots here. 76. It's about 175 average all the way across. So I was within 5 degrees on my guess. So I just pulled the ribs off the smoker. They're resting right now. Went back and watched the footage. It turns out I put the ribs on just after 12 p.m. Took them off just after 6:30 p.m. So they're on 6.5 hours total, which is about 2.5 hours longer than I typically would cook ribs. I did notice that I was off by about 25 to 30 degrees on my estimates on the temperature, a little bit more in one case. And I think the reason for that is today is the warmest day that I've cooked for a while, so I'm probably feeling some of the external heat radiating off of the metal of the smoker, which is probably why it was feeling a little bit hotter to the touch than I'm used to when we're running in that 200 to 250 range. So because I was overestimating what the temperature was, I also underestimated the amount of time that it would take, because it turns out it was actually running 25 to 30 degrees cooler than I would have had I been watching the gauges. So the end result, we'll see. The ribs that we took off already were really good. I think these ones are going to be awesome as well. I'm really pleased with how they turned out. It is interesting that I was off by that much on the temperature gauges. Just good opportunity, good observation, chance to kind of recalibrate that. Would I do it again? Not necessarily. It is nice having the gauges there. They tell a lot of the story, what the fire is doing. At a glance, you don't have to interpret what's going on. So definitely a tool that I'm going to keep using. But this was a very fun experiment to see where just my senses and experience, where those came in terms of interpreting what I thought the smoker was doing. And at the end of the day, it did what I thought it was going to do. Took a little bit longer because it was running a little bit cooler than I thought it was. So now I know. Perfect slices. This knife is just breezing through these. This last one, you can see how much of the bones were starting to show through. This one's probably the best as far as doneness. This one's almost, yeah, it's tearing really easy. Almost fall off the bone. This one's probably the one that's going to be perfect as far as texture. Didn't use any sauce on these. I didn't spray them with anything while they're cooking. I did wrap them, which I wasn't planning on doing, but just to speed things up at the end, decided to wrap them. I think was a good call. But just wanted to show how simple it is to actually do ribs. Didn't use a binder for the spice or the seasoning. Really just sprinkled it on, put them on the smoker, managed the fire, kept an eye on what was going on, and then wrapped them at the end. Pretty straightforward. So there's a look. Get a close-up of that. Nice and juicy. Oh yeah. Take another look at that one there. That looks good. Yeah, this one came out probably the best out of all four. And it's pretty even amount of meat all the way across in this one. So the big reveal. Looks good. See teeth marks. Clean bone. So when I say teeth marks and a clean bone, this is a perfect example. This is that last rack that we opened up. You can see the teeth marks all the way around, and you can see there's no meat sticking to that bone. So you had to bite it to get it off, but it stayed intact as you were biting it. Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's some good stuff.